New India debates at the very prestigious National Law University, Delhi. Thank you so much, New India Junction, for giving me this opportunity to come here and spend time with all of you. I'm sure the subject for the debate as well as the arguments advanced by our young debaters must have truly caught all of your imagination, and I sincerely hope that the best team will win, and we are all looking forward to the results. The subject for us to discuss today, and I'll try to go through the presentation as quickly as possible with all of you, is the journey the country has made over the last 9 years from being a fragile 5 economy to the fastest growing major economy in the world, where we figure among the top 5 economies. 2014, this might startle all of you. About 50% of the country's population did not have access to a bank account. Now, what does this mean in real terms? That about 50% of the country's economy was not part of the formal banking system, formal economy, even 75 years after independence, which meant that about 50% of the country's population did not have access to as simple and mandatory financial products like an insurance. There was no concept of savings in a formal way using a banking system. And when you are not part of the formal banking economy, it doesn't matter if the country's economy is growing at 13%, 12%, 10%, it just doesn't matter because you are not part of the formal economy at all. The very first thing that the government did was to start enrolling people into the banking system. And friends, I want you to appreciate this particular dimension of governance. In less than 2 years, about 50 crore people got bank account for the first time. And how did 50 crore people get bank account for the first time? Because we leveraged technology. There was eKYC. People could register and produce their eKYC credentials easier. And around the world, this became the model, this became the story of financial inclusion of the largest number of people in the shortest period of time. Now, how did this impact the poor? Let me give you a small example. Because somebody had access to a bank account, somebody got a insurance product. This happened in my office during COVID. There was an old man who came to my office and said that his young son, who was just 38, 39, passed away due to COVID. But he came to thank us. I was surprised. I thought, he would be asking for some financial help. But here he was saying that, sir, I had come down to your office a few years ago. We had taken a 12 rupee life insurance. And that happened because we had a Jan Dhan account. And now, right after my son died, the family got 2 lakh rupees as life insurance. Friends, imagine for a minute, 50% of the country's population did not have access to bank accounts 70 years after independence. So the things that we take for granted like medical insurance, life insurance, products of this kind, they were absolutely not available to the largest size of the country's population. Now, how is this going to impact you and me? Now, because a large number of people got access to bank accounts, a large number of people started saving, a large number of companies started providing insurance products, because delivery of services could be made directly without leakage to these people. The weakest and the lowest in the economic strata got social security and strengthened, and as a result of that, 13.5 crore people have come out of poverty. And this, mind you, is the largest number of people lifted out of poverty by a democratic country in the shortest period of time in human history. And how is this going to impact you and I? Now, when 13.5 crore people are coming out of poverty and their purchasing power increases, what are they going to do? Instead of buying one pair of shoes, they will now buy two pairs. Instead of buying one pair of new set of clothes, one set of clothes for say Deepavali, they will buy two pairs of clothes, three pairs of clothes for another occasion. That is going to increase demand in the system. They were going to purchase these things from the local small shop. It's going to create employment and more demand in the system. That is going to transform into factories producing more. And they will need more services. They will need software engineers who will need to write software for it. They will get into contracts. They will need to import things. They will need to enforce contracts. And young lawyers like you will get more opportunities because of that. So 13.5 crore people getting out of poverty means that the entire Indian economy will see so much of buoyancy and vibrancy. And that's what leveraging digital has created. While we have used digital to transform the lives of the poorest, we have also used the power of digital to stop leakages. About 2 lakh crore rupees, which otherwise the country would have lost in transmission and delivery of direct benefits, is now saved because of the Jan Dhan Aadhaar mobile trinity. You all know that a few years ago, when Rajiv ji made this very impactful statement on the state of affairs of the country's economy then, country's polity then, that for every 1 rupee that is sent out of Delhi, only 15 paise reaches the last man. And compare that to the power of the Jam Trinity, where the Prime Minister sends 6,000 rupees to Indian farmers, all the 6,000 rupees reaches him, there's zero leakage, and the intended beneficiary farmer is also intimated by a message from the bank that 6,000 rupees is credited to the account. So we have not only used digital to do Garib Kalyan, we have also used to plug leakages and stop corruption in the system, and we have also used digital as an export product of the country to strengthen our foreign policy. Whether it's with Singapore, whether it's with France, whether it's with Norway, or whether it's with the African Union, India is today a global leader in exporting our digital public infrastructure to these nations. So this is the comprehensive vision in action. Now, look at the Jan Dhan accounts, look at the Mudra Yojana, look at the eNAM. All of these are products that are built on the digital stack. So 13.5 crore people got out of poverty. And most of these have second order and third order reforms. So for example, like the characteristic aspect of the good governance is the improvement that we have witnessed in the life of the poor. I want you to, for a minute, look at the scale of these numbers. 9.6 crore people have got access to LPG cylinders and LPG connection for the first time. 9.6 crore people. That's more population, that's more numbers than many European countries put together. 11 crore Swachh Bharat toilets have been constructed. Can you imagine for a minute not having access to decent toilets and sanitation facilities in 21st century. Until a few years ago, about 11 crore people in this country lived without access to as basic a facility as sanitation. 13 crore households have got access to Nal Se Jal, tap drinking water. 4 crore people have got access to the Awas Yojana. Let me tell you something very interesting that happened a few days ago. I was in my constituency attending a schools program. It was a painting competition in a primary school, and the subject was Indian village. This was the subject that was given. And that took me back to those days when we were participating in such competitions, and I'm sure many of you would also have participated in your primary school days. So what would we paint the moment we were told to paint an Indian village? We would paint an Indian farm lady carrying utensils of water over her head. We would also naturally paint a picture of a open lake where people were going to either collect water alongside washing and cleaning of domestic animals like a buffalo or something. We would also paint a picture of a thatched roof and a small hut and some firewood outside. Wasn't this the picture that we would paint of an Indian village? I mean, if we have participated in some of these painting competitions or seen our sisters or younger brothers participate and see, this is the typical picture of the Indian village. A thatched roof, a kacha house, the lady or the young village girl trying to arrange for potable water, drinking water outside using utensils. No good roads in the village. But see how the picture of the Indian village is changed today. The kids in the school competition that I went and saw did not paint this picture that we were accustomed to painting of an Indian village. Because the village that today's young people are seeing has well-connected, well-laid pakka roads thanks to the Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana, which is connecting the most remotest of hinterlands. Because of the pipe drinking water scheme, 13 crore houses have got access to drinking water for the first time through a pipe. Something that all of us coming from the social economic backgrounds that we come from take for granted. There is no more the picture of the farm lady carrying firewood to cook, because 9 crore houses have got access to LPG connections. We are no more painting the picture of a kacha house with a thatched roof, because 4 crore people have got access to Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, where a roof on their head, a proper RCC house is constructed and given to them. Put together, about 36 crore people have got benefited directly through all of these schemes. So the most important aspect of good governance of this government, the hallmark of leveraging technology, is in how this has transformed the life of the poorest of Indian, has given the weakest of Indian an opportunity to become a part of the formal economy, funding the unfunded, and strengthening the weak, and giving hope to the hopeless. This is the hallmark of good governance, and this has had multiple second order, third order reforms. One study says that just provision or provisioning good sanitation facilities in our villages by building 10 crore toilets has resulted in about 8,000 rupees of savings for a rural household, which otherwise they would have spent on health facilities or going to the doctor. This is the second order, third order reforms. About 6.3 crore direct and indirect jobs have been created. Savings of 8,000 crore per year because of better health outcomes. These are some things that are the intangible second order, third order impact that the country has seen. We spoke of how the formalization of the economy took place. Just look at the sheer size of the numbers, friends. 99% of Indians today have an identity and Aadhaar card. Through the direct benefit transfer, the government has saved 2 lakh rupees, which otherwise would have gone waste. Your money, our money, it's taxpayers' money. Just imagine how seamless and easy our transit at tolls have become. I don't know if it's a practice in the north of India, but at least in the south, those who come from the southern part of the country will relate to this. There were so many cars people would put with these big boards. आप देखें ना नेता टाइप बड़े बड़े बोर्ड्स डाल के ये इस संस्था का अध्यक्ष है, इसका ये फलाना है, ढिंकाना है, सेक्रेटरी है, और टोल में कोई वेट नहीं करता था, बिकॉज टोल में भाई कौन वेट करता है? बिकॉज हम नेता है, इसलिए हम टोल में नहीं वेट करेंगे. यू हैव सीन वीडियोज ऑफ फाइट्स विच हैव बिकम वायरल because people don't want to stand at toll. And मैंने तो देखा हूं बैंगलोर में कई सारे ऑर्गेनाइजेशन जिसका पूरा अस्तित्व सिर्फ लेटर हेड पे होता है. ठीक है, लेटर हेड के बाद में 4 लोग भी नहीं होते ऑर्गेनाइजेशन में, बट उसका जो लेटर हेड ऑर्गेनाइजेशन के प्रेसिडेंट होता है, ही पुट्स अ बिग बोर्ड रेड कलर और वो सायरन के साथ सब डालकर वो घूमते रहते हैं और टोल में कभी नहीं वो खड़े होते, टोल नहीं पे करते. ये एक पैंडेमिक बन गया था पूरे देश में, दैट अब वीआईपी बनना है टोल पास करने के लिए. बट टुडे वी हैव सेव्ड अप टू 80,000 crore rupees. Take a minute to just absorb this number. 80,000 crore rupees, which otherwise we would have lost in tolls. And that is giving us power and strength to build roads at India's border areas. So this is the formalization of economy. Now I want you to look at this one number here, the ease of credit. Because you're students of law and come from a university as premier as this, I want you to look at and analyze the multiple order impacts of this one yojana. Pradhan Mantri Mudra Yojana has sanctioned 25 lakh crore rupees in 43 crore loans. Now what does this mean? Take a minute to understand the impact of this. When we speak of Startup India and unleashing the entrepreneurial animal of India, we generally speak about the 99,000 registered DPIIT startups, which are working in the digital product space. While that also has an impact, the entrepreneurs that the Pradhan Mantri Mudra Yojana has created is far more impactful at the grassroots level. Let me give you an example. Last year, 3 women belonging to a self-help group came to my office. They do not come from a very upwardly mobile social, economic or educational background. One of them had an alcoholic husband. All the 3 had young children, and all the 3 came to my office with their children. Women in the age of say 37, 38, this was the age, do not come from tier 1 cities. They were not from Bangalore. They all came from say Davangere, Chitradurga, small tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 cities of Karnataka. And they wanted help in getting a Mudra Yojana loan. Now what did they want to start? These 3 women had come together to start a pickle making factory, a pickle making unit. And where would they run this out of? They would run this out of their own homes. And to get a Mudra Yojana, they had to come up with a business plan. So the three of them sat together, made a business plan. Imagine empowerment at the grassroots. They made a business plan. Three women coming from this background, they go and approach the bank manager, present the business plan, and they get a loan of 46-47 lakhs sanctioned. They start a business. A few months later, they hire a few other people because the business has grown. Almost a year later, they come to our office just to, along with, packets of some achar and some sweets and other products that they had made, just to give it and just to thank us because we had facilitated in the loan. Then I asked them, how are they repaying? They said that they have not missed one single repayment installment. And now they have 8 different products. 8 different products. They started with one mango pickle, and then they added, some other product. Then they started something else. Then they did, jowar roti. They did something else. They have 8 different products, and they had a new ask. And that ask was, sir, we are told that in Australia, we have a large Kannada-speaking community who likes jowar roti. So we want to export to Australia. We need your help with a export license. Can you imagine the permeation of entrepreneurship at the grassroots level of how this is truly transforming the country? And when I spoke to the banking people, the authorities of the bank, to find out more details about the Mudra Yojana, about 60% of the loans that have been given under the Mudra Yojana have been given to women. And guess what is the NPA? It's less than 3%. NPA of Mudra Yojana is less than 3%, while the biggest of corporates default. The poorest are not defaulting. They are paying on time and they are keeping the banking system alive and healthy. So 43 crore such loans have been given to the tune of 25 lakh crore rupees, and that has created crores of micro entrepreneurs at multiple levels. This is why you see 13.5 crore people who have come out of poverty. Because even if one enterprise will employ 2 people, imagine the amount of employment opportunities this has created. All of these things. The PM Swanidhi Yojana. Many of you may not be aware of this. I'll take a minute to explain to you the impact of this. You know what this PM Swanidhi Yojana is? It's giving collateral free loan to street vendors. Okay? जो थैली वाला होता है, जो रगड़ी पट्टे वाले होते हैं, जो vegetables sell करते हैं, all of that. Many of you may not be aware of how their credit and capital system works in the informal market. If they want 1,000 rupees as credit to start their business in the morning and they go to a money lender, the money lender will give him 900 rupees in the morning. And he will have to return 1,100 rupees in the evening. This is how brutal access to credit in the informal system is for street vendors. मैं आपसे निवेदन करता हूं, because most of us here come from a particular social economic sector, and many times we would not be talking to these people to understand how they deal with credit. The next time you go to buy some sabzi at the sabzi wala, the cart wala, ask him how he gets access to his credit. He will tell you that there will be some money lender somewhere nearby who will give him, if he takes, say, the interest is charged even before the principal, the loan is advanced, and he will have to give back the money the very same evening, and it's like 10%, 12% in a day. So we have given up to 50,000 rupees loan to these street vendors without any collateral, and about 50 lakh street vendors have gotten PM Swanidhi loan. So that's empowering the weakest. That's what the formalization of the economy has done. And there are of course questions that keep coming about कि employment में क्या हो रहा है, employment में क्या हो रहा है. I wouldn't even want to go to explain the impact of Mudra and such other loans. We have discussed about it. But just look at the formal employment that is created. 6.43 crore new EPFO registrations have been achieved in the last few years. 6.43 crore. It's formal people, it's young people getting into the EPFO in a formal manner. Now we have also brought in the country a system where a culture where wealth creation is respected. And as a result of that, we see schemes like Startup India, we see schemes like the PLI, and the biggest example of the success of the PLI scheme is the mobile phone in your hand. 9 years ago, we were nowhere near being an important player in manufacturing of mobile phones. Today, India is the second largest manufacturer of mobile phones in the world. It's something that we have seen. We have decriminalized corporate laws. We have rationalized our corporate tax systems. Our corporate taxation is among the lowest in the world today. We have brought in structural reforms like the GST. We have brought in important legislations like IBC. We have also amended, revised our arbitration laws. And in the coming years, as students of law, you will appreciate that India will be a very important jurisdiction for arbitration, commercial arbitration, international arbitration. We have recapitalized our banks. Just look at the quality of difference in our banks. Our banks had no money to loan. The NPA was around 14%, and today it's just 3.9%. And one point that I want all of you to remember is this: 10 lakh crore rupees of NPA is recovered in the last 9 years. And what is NPA? What would have happened if this NPA is not recovered? Where does banks get the money to donate? I mean, to loan, extend loans. It's your money, it's my money. The money that we would have invested in the bank is what the bank lends. So if 10 lakh crore rupees of loans would not be recovered, what would have happened to your money and my money? So we have not only addressed the NPA problem, we have also recapitalized the banks. And today, despite COVID, despite Ukraine-Russia war, Indian economy to a great extent had a cushioning because of the strength of our banking ecosystem. That's a major achievement which has created this journey, facilitated this journey from being the fragile 5 to the top 5. All of these numbers. Look at the profits, tripled of our public sector banks. Our market capitalization of our PSBs have increased from 4.52 lakh crores to 10 lakh crore today. These are some things that all of you know already. I wouldn't want to spend time on explaining this elaborately. Many words like ease of doing business, startup, venture capitalists, angel funding, bootstrapping, IPO, which has now become a part of our everyday lexicon, did not simply exist a few years ago. You talk to a youngster today, he speaks of, startup, bootstrap, Series A, Series B. A few years ago, these words and terms were just not part of our vocabulary. And today, all states are competing with each other to improve their ease of doing business ranking. ये competition ही नहीं था कुछ साल पहले, but we introduced this concept and started a competition in this. We spoke about the decriminalization of criminal acts. of corporate loss. Just look at direct tax collection. It's a 121% increase from 6.3 lakh crore to 16.61 lakh crore. GST collection is at 18.10 lakh crore in 22-23. The same country, the same set of rules, the same set of legislation, the same set of officers, change in political leadership, and the country's tax revenues have tripled. There's so much more additional money. Now, what is the government doing with all this additional money? Now, all of this additional money is now being used to create infrastructure in this country. Now, what is this infrastructure doing? Why do we need this infrastructure? Many of you who would have visited any country abroad would realize that the difference between, say, the first world countries and India was in the quality of the infrastructure. But in the last so many years, the pace at which we are building highways has tripled. We have built more highways in the last 8-10 years than what previous governments built in 70 years. We have built more airports in the last 7 years than what governments have built in the last 70 years. We have built more medical colleges in the last 9 years than what the country's governments built over the last 70 years. There is a 3-time increase in the number of medical seats, UG and PG. We have built more universities, airports, ports, and just in Delhi you see metro connectivity increasing. So now what is this much of investment in infrastructure going to do? The more money you put in infrastructure creation, it not only creates jobs today, but it also creates jobs of tomorrow, because it triggers a virtuous economic cycle. Because a highway comes, the land prices increase, new investments come, there's petrol stations that will come, there will be hotels that will come, there will be some parks that will come, and economic activity increases. So this is the thrust the country's infrastructure development took place. Just look at the numbers here. Pace of highways have increased 2.4 times. 12,500 kilometers under Bharatmala Yojana is completed. The number of airports have doubled. Rural roads, jiske baat humne kiye, is at 91 kilometers per day. 10 lakh crore rupees is invested in capital expenditure just in 23-24. 725 metric ton capacity is added in our ports. So this is the amount of infrastructure development that has taken place. Now look at this picture of the Kargil-Zanskar road. And I'm sure if many of you would have taken a trip to Ladakh or done a bike ride these days, recently, you would have noticed that whether it's in Arunachal, whether it's in Uttarakhand, or whether it's in Ladakh, the amount of road building activity that is happening is unprecedented. Now, why is this important? Just take a minute to appreciate why building border infrastructure is so important. I don't know how many of you have seen this clip that was viral in social media a few days ago during the parliament session. The earlier defense minister, A.K. Antony, made a speech in the parliament. He was asked by the opposition then as to why we are not building infrastructure in the border areas, especially in the border that is touching China. The defense minister goes on record on the floor of the parliament and says that it's a strategy of the government that we don't want to build roads. And he explains the logic behind it. He says we don't want to build roads because if we build good border infrastructure, the enemy will come inside. So the long-standing policy of the government is not to build border infrastructure. I mean, as hilarious and as incredible as it sounds, this was the official policy of the previous governments. As a result of that, we saw zero improvement in India's infrastructure, physical infrastructure in the border areas. And imagine a defense minister of the country making a statement of this nature on the floor of the house. But today, whether it is Kargil or whether it is Arunachal, whether it's Uttarakhand or whether it is Himachal, there is unbelievable and unprecedented development of border infrastructure, because we realize that when we build and strengthen our border infrastructure at the border, not only are we strengthening our national security internally, but we are also in a better position to deal with adversaries in an external and foreign policy manner. And that is where the money is spent, the infrastructure creation. We discussed of how the exports have increased. Look at just two numbers here. The PLI scheme in 14 sectors has resulted in incremental sales of 6.75 lakh crore, which has now registered in highest annual exports of 447 billion US dollars. Highest ever registered by India. Because we have a PLI scheme, we are incentivizing manufacturing, we are giving impetus to defense manufacturing in India, 14 sectors PLI, EV, all of these things. 98% of all mobile phone shipments from India were locally made. India has now become the third largest automobile market. 23x times increase in defense exports. We are now exporting electrical equipment and machinery 3 times more than what we did in 2014. Just look at this. In toys, there's an increase. In marine exports, there's an increase. Electronic goods, there's an increase. While doing all of this, the country's government has also focused on the cultural revival of this country. Look at the Somnath temple that was desecrated multiple times by invaders. Now the government has rebuilt the Somnath temple and restored its glory. 500 years there was a festering wound which led to so much of division and acrimony. The Ram Mandir, which was not constructed for 500 years, which was a long-standing demand of justice. 500 years the problem was left festering, it's addressed, and we have moved on. So is the case with Kashi Vishwanath. So is the case with multiple other projects at restoring the cultural glory of the country. 300 plus stolen artifacts have been brought back to India. There's a decolonization attempt even at our emblems and insignia of the Navy, the Air Force. Truly transform the cultural space of the country. And while doing all of this, we have also recognized that women-led development is extremely crucial. And now, I just want you to look at this one slide which gives you an idea of how the policies have addressed the women development in the most comprehensive manner. It's a 360-degree attempt. The whole life cycle of the woman, from the daughter to empowering her to be a leader in her workplace, to motherhood care, to boosting entrepreneurial abilities of women, all of this is done. This will fill you with a lot of pride that of the 99,000 DPIIT startups, at least 46% of startups have 1 or 2 women co-founders or women directors. It's an indication of how aspirational our women are today and how the country is witnessing literally a women-led development. The icing on the cake is the 33% political reservation that the Prime Minister gave very recently in India's Parliament and Assembly. From ban on triple talaq to reduction in maternal mortality to empowering women officers in combat roles and in frontline roles in the army. 10,400 women officers are there in the defense forces today, 3x more than what it was in 2014. We spoke of how corruption is decreased, there's a more transparency in the government. E-tendering process, GEM. All of these things have strengthened our war against corruption. India today is also an emerging sports power. All of you are following how the Prime Minister has personally led a culture of respecting sports persons. And all of this has led to a Sashakt Bharat. I want all of you to remember only one thing while I leave all of you with this thought on this. Friends, I don't know how many of you recollect, maybe we were all in school, I was in college and maybe you guys were in school. 2014 se pehle, whenever there would be, one of the common aspects of our newspapers was, along with corruption scandals, one common feature was terror attacks. Whenever there would be a festival, whether it was Bangalore, whether it was Delhi, whether it was Guwahati, Ahmedabad, the terrorists would strike at will. And I don't know how many of you remember, about a decade ago when we would visit, say, railway stations or airports, there would be these constant announcements that would go on, that please take care of unattended belongings, please bring it to the notice of these authorities. Yaad hai aapko? There would be these announcements that would go on, that please watch out for unattended bags, please report it to authorities, because terrorists could strike at will. From 26/11 to what happened in Bombay, Amritsar, what happened in cities like Bangalore, which are relatively safe compared to, say, places like Pathankot. In the last 9 years, I want to emphasize this, underscore this, and request all of you to appreciate the magnitude of this. In the last 9 years, there is 0 terror incidents outside of conflict zones in India. 0 terror incidents, 0 casualties outside of terror zones in India, outside of conflict zones in India. Even Israel, with a small population, with a small geography, and a far more advanced military and intelligence system, cannot boast of this achievement. But in the last 9 years, we have 0 terror casualties, 0 terror incidents outside of conflict zone in India. That's the case not just with radical religious terror, but also with left-wing terror. There's a 44% reduction in terror incidents just in Jammu Kashmir. 77% reduction in left-wing extremism terror. And we spoke of the border development that has taken place. 6,800 kilometers of border roads have been built. 6,800 kilometers of border roads built for the first time. Our defense expenditure has doubled from 3.7 lakh crore, 17 lakh crore to 6.23 lakh crore. And the first time the country has also shown that to defend ourselves, the country will not hesitate to go inside the borders of the enemy, conduct surgical strikes, and neutralize the enemy camps outside of India. So this is the Sashakt Bharat that has come, and this truly has redefined India's position in the global order. We are today a respected geopolitical power. We are no more a rules taker, but we are a part of the rules making group. We are an aspirational geopolitical power which is leading multiple global alliances, whether it's the International Solar Alliance, whether it is the International Biofuel Alliance, whether it is our interventions to understand and regulate cryptocurrency, whether it is our interventions to regulate artificial intelligence, whether it's our opinion and voice at the international standard setting bodies. India today is an important rising global power. I'm sure this is something that you would have seen. In the recently concluded G20, the Prime Minister, along with the Prime Minister of Saudi Arabia, the head of the European Union, and President of the United States, announced this India, Middle East, Europe corridor. Now, what does this mean for us? Two things. You remember that a few centuries ago, India's economy was one of the biggest in the world, and before our invasions, we had a share of up to 27% of the global economy. That was the size of India's economy before our invasions. And where were we making this trade? With whom were we making this trade? How were we making it? Through these very trade routes. We were a prime exporter and trade partner with Middle East, with Israel, with Middle East and with Europe. So the Hindu-Arabic numerals also travel to different parts of the world through this trade routes. Through this one step, we are not only reclaiming our earlier trade routes, but we are also reclaiming our historical ambitions to be a very, very powerful voice at the global level. And this is just an indication. We have seen how India is surpassing our own benchmarks that we set for ourselves, in whether it's intellectual property, whether it's in energy, whether it is in climate change. I would want all of you to just look at this one slide as we conclude. In 2013, the newspaper headline said that economy grows at slowest rate in a decade. Today, India is the fastest growing global economy. 2013, the industrial growth rate was at a 20-year low. Today, we are at a 30-month high in our manufacturing. Banks' NPA assets had surged 50%. Today, the bank's bad loans have fallen to a 10-year low. Rupee was amongst the worst performing currencies in the world, and today rupee remains the best performer against other global market currencies. This is something that the country has achieved over the last so many years. I would only want to leave all of you with this thought before we take a few questions, if you have any. The next 25 years are extremely important for all of us, because the next 25 years, the country is at crossroads. The next 25 years, all of us have opportunities multiplied for ourselves and for others. The impact that we can make the next 25 years is not only going to be at a domestic level, but it's going to be at a global level, which is why the Prime Minister says, यही समय है, सही समय है, ये भारत का समय है. Thank you so much for being a very patient and a very engaging audience. Thank you so much.
Giving freebies is an all-time high in Madhya Pradesh. Same is the case with Rajasthan. We saw that in Karnataka as well. So my question is, how do you see a solution to the issue of freebies? And because sir, there is a competition between different parties. It's not a particular party problem. Every party is giving freebies, and there is a competition among them to give more and more freebies to the people.
Very, very important question that you have asked. Unfortunately, in competitive politics, all political parties are constrained to walk a particular path, even though it may be harmful both at the short-term level as well as at the long-term level. The Prime Minister has unequivocally made it clear that there is a difference between empowerment and distribution of revenues. While empowerment strengthens the weakest of individual and is done with an intent to strengthen the economy as a whole, distribution of freebies is done with the sole intent of winning an election. I think it's important for us to evolve a more mature political culture where electorates will play a very important role by understanding the long-term disastrous benefits of these Revdi political culture. And if one political party is going down that route, and if it's yielding them electoral dividends, it will naturally force other political parties to toe that line, and it's not healthy for a democracy as a whole. When a party that is known for this Revdi politics tried to implement this model in Gujarat, the people of Gujarat rejected that particular party and politics, lock, stock and barrel. There is hope that with an electorate that is aware, things will work better. 2, it is important for us to explain to the common electorate the difference between true empowerment and temporary freebie distribution. And it's a hard work that needs to be done. It's a work that political parties, it's the shortcut to win elections, but this is the right way to do it. The Prime Minister has not once, but on multiple occasions, tried to educate the people, tried to make it very clear that as far as the BJP is concerned, as far as the government is concerned, that we believe in empowerment of the weak and not temporary Revdi politics. So I think there's no shortcut to it other than explaining to people the disastrous effect that it will have on the country as a whole and as individuals in a society.
So you talked about the economic indicators and how we are doing good on them, but I also wanted to ask about the state of civil liberties in India. We are, if I remember correctly, in the Press Freedom Index, we are 161 out of 180 nations. Media houses are being raided, and we see that UAPA charges are being imposed on media houses. So I'd just like to ask your comment about how do you perceive the shift in civil liberties in India, given the recent events and how we are being looked at in the world on that aspect.
So recently you mean NewsClick?
Precisely.
There is a fundamental difference between journalism and espionage. There's a fundamental difference between ethical journalism and being a fifth column of an adversarial country. No person can say or use as defense that he's a journalist, he's a lawyer, or he's somebody else if he's going to be a fifth columnist for somebody else. Ethical journalism will be respected and protected, even if it is going to be something that criticizes the ruling dispensation. That's the hallmark of a constitutional democracy, something that is an article of faith for us. But that doesn't mean that fifth columnists and people who want to do espionage in the garb and cloak of journalism will be given a free hand. You cannot be pursuing a activity that is pecuniarily funded by an adversarial state, and when prosecuted, claim the defense that I am a journalist or I am a lawyer or I am somebody else. If somebody working in the armed forces, say, can be tried and prosecuted on similar charges, and if they cannot have the defense that, oh, I belong to the armed forces and this is an attack on the army, in the same way somebody in the profession of journalism, if they are indulging in an activity of this kind, cannot use their profession as a defense for their activity. And we all know that the courts in the country are robust, that the country's courts have a history of throwing open its doors and giving a midnight hearing to even convicted terrorists. So even in cases of this kind, if there is malicious prosecution, people will go to the courts and there will be due process and the courts will give their verdict. And this is a country that respects the court's judgments. I only want to say this. If you are an ethical journalist, the government of the day will go out of the way to protect you. And the court system in this country, the systems in this country are so robust that a malicious prosecution that was made against, say, Nambi Narayan fell flat. But if you are going to be a fifth columnist, then we will hunt you down. This is something that needs to be made clear.
सही समय है